So
You know, we just borrowed this camera. This is Fulton Heights in action. You just turn it on, Jeff.
yeah.
You know, this is the same way that it always used to be. You have a problem, you go to your neighbor to get some help. Jeff's camera just broke, so we went to his neighbor.
Wonderful.
And she said, well, sure, here's my digital camera. And so we can continue the history project.
That's right.
Thank you, Lawsons.
There you go.
Mine doesn't work.
That was pretty much the essence of the whole neighborhood.
Really?
Yeah.
Really? Well, what sorts of things like that can you remember? Well, let's say Earl, you grew up down here 625?
625.
On Maupin.
On Maupin. And as I said to you earlier, my dad built that house in 1923. In fact, I was born in that house in 1931.
Really?
Yeah. And last year they had open houses here in the Fulton Heights area. And that house was one of those that you could visit at that time.
Right.
And Jim Styrwell, thank you, asked me to come over. And we really enjoyed that. And there were people coming through. They were always quite surprised when Jim would say to them, this guy was born in this house.
I know. I was there that night, and I heard some of those stories. I was out front welcoming people, and you were back telling stories with Jim and the family.
Right. Yeah.
And that was such a neat experience.
Well, it was just wonderful. At that time, in that 600 block, the first house, the Harrises lived there, and Barbara Harris, that I know well, is still here in town, and Barbara Richmond she is now, although she might be here today. But between that first house in the 600 block and the end of the block, it was all woods in there. There were no houses built there.
600, is that where Bert Harris was from? Is that?
That's Bert, yeah. Barbara is Bert's brother, of course.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but there were woods in there, and it was after World War II that those other houses there were built. We were next to the last house in the 600 block. The last house was owned by the Somersets, T.W. Somerset, and he was part of the Somerset family.
That's the funeral home?
Funeral home, yeah.
Okay.
And it was just a great neighborhood there, and the Mayfields were over on one corner. There's a beautiful white home in the next block, in 700 block on the right.
Yeah.
That was owned by the Foreman back at that time. And Mr. Foreman was here in town, and there was a department store named Eford's Department Store. It was on Main Street downtown. And that's what that was his business.
Oh.
And
so Mr. Foreman was the manager of Eford.
He was the manager of Eford's.
And which store is in the old Eford's now?
Well, it's probably empty now. It's on South Main Street.
Okay.
And it would be catty corner across from the farmer's market.
Okay. So part of the Empire Hotel
it
block.
Was in that, in that area.
Block.
And it was the last place of business in that block.
Okay.
Yeah, going south, you might say, on the right. And then the Hardens lived down there. And that was a beautiful home. It was the first house in the 700 block. But my dad worked for the county. He came here in 1916. And he was the manager and treasurer of the Yadkin Hotel.
Really?
Yeah. So I'm now going to share some news with a lady who's at the Yadkin Hotel and wants some history about that. But I did know that he came here and he worked here probably until 1925 and 1926. And that was just a special time. But
the Yadkin Hotel, their customers came from the railroad station right across the street there.
That's right. It was a busy hotel. And of course, for many years in this town, it was a place to meet. Kiwanis Club met there, JC's in the early days met there, because this was prior to all of the nice places we have today. You know, like the Holiday Inn and all the Catawba College influence and everything like that. I guess one of my favorite stories about Maupin, later on many years, when I was older, if we were fortunate enough, and I think I was in college at the time, and I had a job. I could get a job at Christmas delivering mail. They always needed extra carriers at Christmas. So I was able to get a job at the post office, and it paid pretty good. So I reported to work one day, and they told me where I was going to be working, and Mr. Sowers, who was the postmaster, says, you're going to be working Maupin Avenue and Hyde, carrying the mail. I said, fine. So I took off. I had a big leather bag on my back, you know. And so I came down Maupin. At that time, I'd been away from home for a year or so, first year in college and all that kind of stuff. And I hadn't been here in a while. And so as I came down Maupin, I saw a lot of people that I'd known in previous years. When I got to the Foyles house, which is over there next to where you are now.
Right.
Yeah, Frances and Linwood Foyles. You know, Frances was a very friendly person and very nice, and she recognized me as I carried the mail up to her door. And she says, how you doing? And we talked. She says, why don't you come in for a cup of coffee? So I
You're
said,
delivering the mail.
I'm delivering the mail. I said, well, that'd be wonderful. That'd be nice. And so we went in and chatted, and as you can imagine, we chatted too long. So I was pretty late getting back to the post office. It was like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I walked in, and I'll never forget Mr. Sowers standing there with his hands on his hip. He looked like a major in a way. And he said to me, Haynes, where have you been? I said, I stammered a little bit. Of course, I said, well, Mr. Sowers, I've been delivering the mail. He said, oh, he said, didn't you know we're making 2 deliveries a day? I said, no, sir. In that time, you had to go twice. They delivered Christmas mail, you know.
Oh, yeah, all the Christmas cards.
All the cards and all that. So he said, get back out. You got one more run to make. I visited too long that day. It was a great story. And I really learned a lesson there.
I'm sure you did.
Yeah, but it's a great neighborhood. And the Foyles.
Let me just insert one tiny little thing. It's amazing to me how many interconnections there are. My last year in college, I too worked for the post office.
You know what? You know, the mail must go through. Deliveries are very important.
Absolutely. I worked in the Madison Central Post Office, sorting mail, all kinds of odd jobs, kinds of things.
Are you in charge?
Here we are, different parts of the world come together, sit in somebody's backyard. We're 2 part-time mailmen.
Oh, gee.
Well, let's see now. Did your dad build the house?
He built that house.
Oh, okay. And
He
that
built
was
it.
23 years?
1923.
Oh, well, that's pretty close to 1929. How did you survive that?
You know, I really don't know. He, at that time, had been with the Yadkin Hotel, where he worked a number of years. Following that, he opened a furniture store here. It was called the Yadkin Furniture Store. And of course, the Depression in 29 in those years took care of that. Shortly after that, maybe early in the 30s, he ran for a job here at Rowan County Auditor and Treasurer. He worked in the courthouse as the Auditor and Treasurer for the county. And you had to be run for re-election every 2, maybe every 4 years. I can't remember. He never lost an election.
Wow.
He served in that job until he was up in his 60s.
Oh my goodness! And then where did you continue to live here in Salisbury through the years? Or?
No. Of course, I went to school at Carolina, and I finished there. The Korean War sort of interrupted that education at that time, and I should have graduated, would have graduated in 1953. I graduated in 1956. I went to work for Eastman Kodak Company, and I'd interviewed with them and this kind of thing, and I went training program in New York for about 8 weeks, which was really a change of lifestyle from here in the South, you might say.
Right.
And was located in Baltimore 2 or 3 years before I came back here.
So then you returned to Salisbury.
I returned to Salisbury.
Now, did you pick up on friendships that you had developed as a child in this neighborhood?
Oh,
then?
yeah. We did, certainly, yeah. And some of those people are thinning out quite a bit.
Well, yeah.
As to be expected. But, oh, yeah, reconnected and with people here and through the church. Met a lot of new people that had come to town. So it's just been one of those, as I told Kid, because we married about 6 years ago, I said, you know, you'll like Salisbury, you can get around pretty easily. Probably find a place to park on Main Street without any problem. And you'll love the Presbyterian Church, and I think she really enjoys her activities there.
So your family was connected to First Pres downtown? Or?
My family were Methodist.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And of course, Kit's family, her husband was a Presbyterian minister. He died about same time, close to the same time that my first wife passed away. So that's about all the news I can share.
Well, thank you very much.
That's more like you should put on that camera.
All the news that's news from